Hello, welcome. Today, I want to invite you to a different conversation. Perhaps the strangest, and at the same time the truest, you've ever heard about a pope. Let's not talk about Vatican politics, not even scandals or reforms. Let's talk about something much more subtle, and for that very reason, more powerful. Let's talk about a name that has come back into existence. Lion XIV. Maybe you saw the ad. Maybe you didn't even care. But that name carries a whisper that needs to be heard. But before we continue, let me make a very direct request. If you feel that spirituality no longer fits in the old forms, if you're looking for something deeper than empty ceremonies, subscribe to the channel. Because here, we don't explain doctrine, we listen to what comes from within. And sometimes that inside starts with something as simple as a name, Lion. Why Leon? No one had used that name for over a century. He was kept, and names kept hidden. When they return, never return for no reason. Why would someone choose Lion in the 21st century? In a world where the church has lost its luster, where silence weighs more than liturgy, where faith has turned into noise and the altar has become a showcase? Why would a simple man, upon being elected, accept to carry that very name? A name that does not suggest peace, not even neutrality, but strength, instinct, roar. That's where our journey begins. When the name is more than just a word. At the moment when Leo XIV pronounced his new name, something ancient broke, not with a bang, but with silent recognition. It was as if something forgotten within many people had stirred a little, as if the heart were saying, I remember this. I needed this. I didn't even know I was hoping, but I was hoping, because the name Lion was not chosen to impress. He was chosen to awaken. The beginning of the journey. The choice of Leo XIV marks something we still cannot name. But this is how the things that really matter begin. Not with answers, but with presences that make us question again. In the upcoming episodes, we will try to understand not who the Pope is, but what he symbolizes. Not what he governs, but what he evokes. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find out that this lion didn't come to command, came to call back. If this affected you in any way, stay with me until the end. In part 2, we will understand why the name becomes a mission, and what Leo XIV might be saying to the world, without saying anything. When the name becomes mission, what leads a man to choose the name Lion? This is not an institutional question, it's a spiritual question. Because when a pope chooses his name, he is not just honoring someone. He is, in a way, telling the world, this is what I accept to be. And accepting being a lion is not easy. The name is not imposed. It's assumed. No one forces a pope to choose any name. It is in the silence, right after the election, that he says how he wants to be called. And that name, from then on, defines everything. His image, his gesture, his relationship with the time he lives in. But the name Lion carries a contradiction. He is not discreet. He is not delicate. It's not diplomatic. It's ancient, fierce, and straightforward. And in a time when everything has become relative, light, and tolerant, choosing this name is not just bold, it's prophetic. The name as a mirror. If the Pope had chosen a safe name, no one would be talking about it. But when one chooses something forgotten, and strong, and dense, the questions start. And perhaps that's what Leo XIV wants to provoke. Not an answer, but a mirror. Because today's world has gotten used to leaders who explain too much. With careful speeches, planned images, statements that say everything. And, at the same time, nothing. But what if a spiritual leader doesn't want to be understood right away? And what if he just wants to make his presence felt? Like someone planting a seed. The name Lion is this, a seed that you don't see growing, but it grows. The roar that no one hears, but feels curiously. Lion XIV has not been making grand speeches. He is not media savvy. He is not charismatic in the classical sense. Doesn't attract crowds with words. But maybe his roar isn't in the sound, but in the vibration. Something invisible, yet real. Something that touches only those who are still willing to feel. And the world has been needing this. Of presences that don't explain, but that exist with depth. When the name is a vow, Leon XIV, by choosing this name, seems to have made an inner vow. A vow from someone who knows that the time of the institutional church is changing, and that perhaps the next temple will not be made of stone, but of soul. In this context, being a lion is less about ruling and more about guarding. Guard what still remains. Protect what still shines. Sustain what can still be born, even if in silence. In the next part, we will explore the church he inherited. Oh, and the one he might be trying to awaken, because between the walls of the Vatican and the emptiness of the squares, there is a dormant faith, and maybe it's for her that this lion has returned. The church he inherited, and the one that is awakening. Let's imagine together for a moment. You are inside an empty basilica. The stained glass windows still filter the light as before. The altar is there, the incense, the silence, the architecture, but something is missing, and you know exactly what it is, even without being able to name it. There is a lack of vibrant presence, the faith that still exists but hides. Many say that the church has lost followers. Others say it has lost authority, but perhaps what she has lost, or fallen asleep, is even simpler and deeper. The feeling that God is still there. Today, the churches are more modern. The sermons are more accessible. The most trained leaders. But many who come and go feel the same, a distance between the right and the soul. And it is precisely in that empty space that Leo XIV emerges. Not to reform the church, but to remember why it exists. Leo XIV doesn't seem concerned with updating structures. He is not a pope of works. He is not building new cathedrals, nor reforming the liturgical calendar. What he is doing, or trying to do, is to re-establish the sacred in the intimate. Repositioning faith in the place where it was originally created, within the human being, because maybe he realized that the church today doesn't need more strength, it needs truth, of presence, of reunion. The church he inherited, Leon XIV, inherited a fragmented church, divided between tradition and modernity, between spirituality and performance. Many within the church still debate what it should do to survive, but he, silently, seems to be asking another question. And if the church doesn't need to be saved, but rather to return to what it was in its origin. That origin was not an institution. It was a community of people who believed together, even if hidden, who prayed softly, even in fear, and who knew how to listen to the presence of God, even without grand ceremonies. The church that is awakening. In parallel with the great visible church, another one is beginning to emerge. It's not in the news, not even on social media. She grows in silence, within simple homes, tired hearts, people who have given up on the spectacle, but not on faith. Perhaps Leo XIV is, above all, the silent sign of this new church, not one that expands, but one that awakens, that does not seek power, but authenticity. In the next part, we will delve deeper into this contrast, the void between the heart of the faithful and the altar, and how Leo XIV might be trying to bridge that gap not with words, but with presence. The void between the heart and the altar. Imagine the altar of a grand cathedral. He is there, elevated, illuminated, adorned with gold and history. Now imagine the heart of an ordinary person, sitting in the last row, maybe tired, maybe confused, maybe full of faith, or completely empty, and between the two, there is a distance that no homily can bridge. The distance that no one names. For a long time, the image of the Pope was that of a universal shepherd, someone who guided millions with the power of the word and the authority of the office. But little by little, that image became too distant, not because of a specific pope, but because the world has changed, and spirituality has changed along with it. Today, the human heart no longer responds to ritual for its form. He wants truth, presence, intimacy, and the more sumptuous the altar becomes, the colder it seems. Leon XIV seems to know this. Since his election, he has avoided the big stages. Doesn't shout, doesn't impose. It cannot be justified. It's as if he had chosen a place between the altar and the people, neither above nor below. Just there, in the interval. An interval where many got lost, where much faith wore out, where the figure of the Pope has become just a symbol, and lost its inner meaning. But perhaps Leo XIV wants to restore what has been forgotten. The idea that the true altar is not in the stone, but in the heart. The throne of the heart. When we say throne of Peter, we think of the Vatican, in the physical chair, in papal authority. But what if there is another throne, more hidden, more silent, the throne of the heart? This throne is not exclusive to anyone. He is not in Rome, not in Jerusalem. It's where someone retreats, opens up and asks, "Is there still something in me that believes?" Maybe Leo XIV doesn't just want to occupy the throne of Peter. Maybe he understood that the only throne that still matters is the interior. That one where God, if he still resides, needs to be invited back. When the Pope descends the steps, and what if, instead of ascending, the Pope descended the steps of the altar? Not as renunciation, but as reconciliation. To look into the eyes of those in the back row. To say, without saying, that there is still meaning, that there is still presence, that the distance can be crossed, but only by those who choose to bend down. In the next part, we will talk about this in even more depth, the idea of an invisible Vatican, a place where the Pope does not reign over crowds, but walks alongside those who still believe, even if in silence. From the invisible Vatican to the inner church, there is a place within each person who has ever had faith. Even if today she says she no longer believes, even if she has distanced herself, even if you have forgotten, this place doesn't disappear. He just falls silent. And perhaps the Church's greatest mistake in recent decades has been trying to rebuild stone cathedrals, while the living temples within people were crumbling. The Vatican that no one sees. When we talk about the Vatican, we think of marble columns, crowds in the square, windows open to the world. But what if there were another Vatican? One that doesn't appear on maps, not even in the news, but that pulses, invisibly, within every being that still seeks meaning. This invisible Vatican has no walls, but it has depth. There are no saints on display, but there is spiritual memory. There are no public rituals, but it keeps a secret altar, an altar that sometimes only reignites when everything seems to have been lost. The spiritual function of the Pope, perhaps the role of Leo XIII, is not to reconquer the world for faith. Maybe it's to remind the world that faith still resides within it. In some corner, hidden, beneath layers of haste, wounds, and disbelief. Because the human heart was not made for emptiness. It is made to welcome presence. And if the Church, as an institution, has distanced itself, Leon XIII seems willing to take the opposite path, to enter where no one else dares to go. The inner church. There are people who will never go back to Mass, but they still feel something when they hear a psalm. That they no longer kneel, but cry in front of a candle. That no longer repeat prayers, but keep silent with God in secret. This is the inner church. It is not built with bricks. It is not sustained by donations, but it endures, even when everything external seems to fail. Maybe it's this church that Leo XIV is trying to awaken, not with decrees, not with reforms, but with their own withdrawn presence. Reconstruction begins from within. When everything falls apart, the first thing we need to find is not an exit, it's a center. Leo XIV seems to know this. He is not trying to win back followers. He is just positioning himself as a discreet reminder. The faith you seek, maybe it never left. She's just waiting for you to come back. The gesture that speaks without sound today, almost everything is communicated excessively. The networks are full of words. The pulpits are filled with opinions. Even faith has become content. But what if what really transforms isn't what is said, and yes, what is lived in silence? That's what Leo XIV seems to understand like few others. The Pope who speaks little. Since he took office, Leo XIV has spoken little. There are no catchphrases. There are no religious slogans. There is no need to compete for headlines. But at the same time, it's impossible not to notice the weight of his presence, a glance, a pause, a nearly imperceptible gesture. And yet all of this communicates more than any doctrinal document. The strength of the gesture that no one records, in times when everything needs to be photographed and published. Leo XIV does the opposite. He acts where no one is watching, visits a hospital discreetly without the press, attends a wake without announcing it, receives a letter, and responds in his own handwriting. They are such small gestures that only those who still have an awakened heart can perceive the greatness. And maybe that's the point. He doesn't try to convince, he calls for presence. When faith returns through the detail, have you ever noticed how a simple gesture can touch deeply? Someone who holds your hand in a difficult moment. Someone who stays silent with you, in no hurry to leave. Someone who looks into your eyes and doesn't need to explain anything. It's this kind of gesture that Leo XIV seems to practice. Not to make an impact, but because he understands that true faith doesn't need an audience. The language of the invisible. While the world screams for attention, Leo XIV seems to whisper something deeper. You don't need to listen to me, just notice me. It's the language of the invisible, of the subtle, of the gesture that does not impose, but offers itself, and that awakens something that was dormant in many. Not admiration, but silent respect. A gesture can save a faith. Maybe you won't even remember an entire sermon, but you'll never forget the gesture of someone who truly listened to you. Leo XIV understands that one does not lead only with ideas. One leads with presence, with coherence, with humanity. And perhaps in the end, that's what is bringing so many people back to themselves. The example of a pope who, without saying anything, says everything. In the next part, we will delve deeper into this individual impact, how Leo XIV can become a figure of personal restoration, even for those who have lost institutional faith, but still hold a spark that hasn't been extinguished. Lion among the ashes. Faith and personal restoration. There are people who live their faith as if walking on old embers. There is no longer any fire. The flame seems to have vanished, but deep down, there are still hot embers. And maybe that's all it takes to start over. Leo XIV did not come with torches, came with silence, with presence, with respect for that discreet warmth that survives even when everything seems lost. The faith that survives without a stage today. Many people say they no longer have faith, but when you listen more deeply, you realize that what was lost wasn't faith. It was the bond with what is sacred, and this loss was not out of malice. Many times it was due to exhaustion, out of frustration, out of disappointment with the institution, with the rituals, with the gap between discourse and life. But even so, the flame didn't go out. She just protected herself. The Pope as an inner catalyst. Leo XIV seems to be aware that it is no longer possible to lead solely from above. The time of distant thrones is behind us. Today, the true spiritual leader is the one who awakens the silent consciousness within each person. And he does it without invading, without promising, without manipulation. He only exists as a mirror, a reminder that faith can be restored, but only from the inside out. Faith cannot be taught, it is reignited. Leon XIV does not try to educate people in faith. He seems to know that no one can teach someone to believe. Believing is personal, it's intimate, it's fragile, and it takes time. What he does, discreetly, is create the space for that flame to breathe again. Even if shy, even if alone, even if still surrounded by doubt, a pope who cares for the invisible. It's easy to govern the visible. Difficult is keeping what no one sees. Leon XIV seems to have chosen to be the guardian of the invisible, of the faith that still exists in weary hearts, of simple gestures, two internal reunions. He doesn't shout to call back. He waits, and those who feel return, not to the church, but to yourself. The last pope. Within us, and if everything we've said so far isn't about Leon XIV, and if this story, this name, this silence, for just a mirror placed before our faith. For centuries, it was expected that the Pope would be a symbol of the divine in the world. Today, perhaps he is a reminder that the divine has never left us. We just stopped looking. The end of an era? For some, Leo XIV is the last of an era. The last pope before a transformation that can no longer be avoided. The last to hold on to a structure that is slowly crumbling. But what if it's not the end? And if it's the intermission? The moment of pause between what we were and what we are learning to be? A time when faith no longer comes from the outside, but it emerges from within. Lonely, serene, real. A pope who doesn't govern. Remember, Leo XIV is not shaping dogmas. He is not launching historical reforms. He is simply present, and your presence, silent and firm, seems to say, you can still believe, even if you don't know how, even if you are alone, even if you have unlearned. He doesn't demand anything. He simply opens a space where faith can breathe again. The church that begins where no one sees today. Perhaps the true church is no longer in the cathedrals, not in the vestments, not in speeches. Maybe she is being reborn at kitchen tables, in silent rooms, in tired looks, in small gestures of care and reverence. And perhaps Leon XIV is just witnessing this birth, without control, without structure, just with humility. The last or the first? The question that remains is not whether Leo XIV will be the last pope, but whether he is the last of the old model, or the first of the invisible, because the true throne he can occupy is not in the Vatican. It is in the innermost part of each one who, even when wounded, still allows themselves to believe. And if that's the case, then maybe the story of Leon XIV hasn't even begun yet. Thank you for coming all the way here. If something within you was touched by this journey, remember, you don't need to understand everything to keep searching. Faith is not an explanation, it's a direction. Until next time.